I think we need to wake up to the reality of life, and that is that we're we're on a very fine line of, either pulling the trigger and ending life as we know it, or going to the other side and actually making life enjoyable for humanity, not just for a select group.
This is the future.
Hello and welcome to the Alternate Futures podcast, where we chat with indie sci-fi creators about their work, the world, and anything in between or beyond. I'm your host, Edwin Rydberg, and today I'm here with Michael Bianco. Michael has spent a lifetime navigating the edge between science and the unknown. Born in Italy, raised in Quebec, and now living in Florida's Gulf Coast, he's traveled to over 60 countries, worked across continents, and built a successful engineering firm before stepping into the shadows of fiction. Fluent in 3 languages and the holder of 6 international patents, he's no stranger to puzzles or innovation. A lifelong fan of speculative fiction and classic thrillers, his influences range from Asimov and Clarke to Ludlum and Dan Brown. When not unraveling conspiracies on the page, he enjoys cooking, photography, and golfing badly. He's still chasing the perfect shot on the course and through the lens. His debut novel, Orion Seed, fuses scientific realism with pulse-pounding intrigue, a story born from decades of experience, curiosity, and an eye towards what lies just beneath the surface. Hi, Michael. Thanks for joining me today.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
So I guess the first thing that stood out to me, because my family's fairly diverse as well, is your diverse places you've lived, I suppose, coming from Italy originally. My wife's Italian, by the way.
Lucky you.
I'm curious which part of Italy you're from.
From the southern part, the Campania region, just north of Naples.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so my wife's from the south as well, so interesting. Yeah, more in the Puglia region.
Right.
Yeah.
That's way south.
and also, so obviously I'm Canadian. You picked that up in the pre-chat.
Mm-hmm.
You said you lived in Quebec. I'm assuming Montreal.
I did live in Montreal for a couple of years. No, we lived north of Montreal, a little town called Saint Therese. And I went to school there, and I was 3 years old when my parents emigrated.
Okay, because almost everyone goes to Montreal or Toronto basically when they come.
Yeah.
So how do you find Quebec then?
It was great. I grew up there, went to school there, still have many friends there. Montreal is a super city. I love going back and visiting friends and relatives. I really enjoy the area and the country there.
So you also mentioned you have 6 patents.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. What are some of them in?
Well, so most of my career is engineering, and specifically engineering for what they call post-harvest technology. So the care and handling of fruits and vegetables after they've been harvested, so that you can maintain them at the peak of freshness and quality. And so what I developed was systems to help the ripening of certain fruits like bananas, tomatoes, mangoes, that kind of stuff, and do it in an energy efficient way. And my original designs actually are now almost 100% in use. The unfortunate thing is I didn't protect them properly with my patents, so I don't get the benefit, but everybody else does, which is good too. And a lot of the other designs had to do with just heating and cooling technology for mobile units and the quick cooling of fruits and vegetables. It really helps to preserve their quality.
That's really interesting. That's another link with us, actually, because when I was in university, I worked for 4 months in a government research facility that was studying the storage of fruit. So there we go, back in the early 90s. How did you get into such a field?
You fall into things. You never go to school thinking you're going to build banana ripening rooms. But when I left school, I started design work. I used to work for Cadbury Schweppes in Montreal, designing equipment, chocolate making equipment, and all that. And then from there, I went to work for a company called Chiquita Brands. And I got into the fresh fruit and produce industry. They had an engineering department where they helped their customers maintain and look after their facilities. And that's basically how I got into that. And just one thing led to another. And eventually went off on my own and formed an engineering company where we built produce handling facilities, fruit distribution facilities and at ports and inside customers' facilities and all that. So it just, it just one thing, you fall into it, and if you like it, you keep going. If you don't like it, I guess eventually you find something else, right?
Yeah, I mean, I could chat with you on that all day. I'm very curious about it. But one more thing before we move on it. So this obviously very tightly linked to supply chains of food movement around the world.
Right.
So what's your interpretation of what's happened? Because I've been understanding that at least behind the scenes, there are a lot of supply chain issues lately as the world sort of collapses.
There are, I mean, the commercial production of fruits and vegetables, unfortunately, is dominated by a few big companies. And it's unfortunate because if they weren't there, a lot of people probably wouldn't be able to have access to that food. The unfortunate thing is that a lot of food today has been engineered for looks and transportation rather than taste and nutrition. I remember eating tomatoes from my mother's garden, and all you needed was a little bit of salt and olive oil on it. It was a meal, it was delicious. The flavor was there, the acidity, the sweetness. And today you buy some tomatoes at your local grocery store, and you put them on the shelf, and 2 weeks later they look like the same. They haven't moved at all.
Frightening,
That
isn't
tells
it?
you that right there, that tells you something. Or you pick up strawberries that look beautiful, delicious, red, and they don't have the flavor to go with it, you know. So yeah, I mean, it sort of cuts both ways, but and the supply chain, you know, I think we got to be careful in the way we handle our natural resources in terms of water and arable land. And, you know, we could overuse it and then we keep pumping additional nutrients into it, which gets into the water supply. And it's one whole big chain. And I'm not an eco freak in any sense of the word, but I sort of understand the effects of over farming certain lands. And in fact, I'm still doing consulting work, but on CEA, which is Controlled Environment Agriculture, where we do it indoors. And we control everything indoors. And believe it or not, we're actually developing fruits and vegetables for both flavor and nutrition without the use of any herbicides or pesticides, which is
Oh,
great.
that's excellent. Yeah. Because I have been noticing over the last few years a lot of changes in the fruit, both in the taste and the texture outside and inside. It's on my mind that there's a lot of additives or additional stuff going into the the
Yeah.
production, or maybe probably for storage and transport. But yeah, it is crazy.
I think you'll notice a huge difference if you leave your home there in the UK and go to places like southern Italy, even southern France, Spain, Turkey, and eat the fresh fruit when it's available in season.
Right.
Yeah, the difference is night and day.
Yeah, I can imagine. We don't have a lot of homegrown fruit here.
Yeah, well, in the wintertime, probably.
So you've traveled a lot. I just wanted to ask a quick question. Do you have any standout must-see places?
Yeah, I do. One of my favorite countries is actually Turkey, Istanbul, a fantastic city, a lot of history and culture. The food is really fantastic. The restaurants are great. A lot of fresh seafood, which is one of my favorites, of course. And the country, of course, has a very colored history and varied history going back hundreds and hundreds of years. And they practically ruled the world at one point. And you see a lot of intermingling of cultures there. You don't see the same issues that you might see in other parts of the world down there. And every now and then something flares up, but you know, you're going to get that no matter where you go. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. I lived in Odessa in the Ukraine for 3 years, back around 2007, before they had these major issues, and that was really a wonderful time too. But if I had to say where should I visit that's interesting, I would go to Istanbul. That's a great area for me.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I've heard Turkey itself has some pretty amazing sites, and I have been to
It does.
Istanbul once for a conference. That was a very amazing city. So I was wondering then, so your LinkedIn says, as you said, Managing Director of Agritech Insights. How do you go from that to starting to write science fiction?
I'm still doing that. And the writing part is because I don't have too many clients, so I have a lot more time to write. But no, I've always loved science fiction. I mean, growing up as a kid, it made up my library and it showed me the potential of science and technology. I remember, and I'm going to date myself, but I remember when the Dick Tracy watches were a thing and all you had was a picture of somebody on your watch and you pretended to talk to somebody. Well, now we can do it. You know, in those days, it was science fiction. The phones that we use today to speak to somebody, they had them on Star Trek. You know, they would flip it open and talk to somebody. Well, we do that now. So to me, science fiction is really should be renamed science of the possible because
Yeah.
really everything that's been portrayed in the majority of science fiction films, until you get to the warp speed thing, but has come to fruition. It's there. Whoever heard of PET scans and MRIs in the 50s? Nobody. I mean, they didn't know that those things are possible. All you had was fuzzy x-rays, you know? And I've always had that belief that the technology would improve over time and we would get to where we are today. But unfortunately, we don't have flying cars yet, but there's still time.
Well, they're working on the warp drive, apparently, at least theoretically.
I've
And
heard.
I mean, the flying cars do exist in at least prototypic ways. The thing I think we're discovering with that, because I'm probably like you know, this great science fiction. Oh, we're going to have all this in the future. And even when we do develop, like they even have jetpacks developed now, not great,
Right.
but they fly for like 10 or 15 minutes, the best ones, at a cost of like 300,000 pounds or something. But I think we're seeing the real bottleneck is bureaucracy, isn't it? Like, so let's say we
Yeah.
bring in flying cars. I've been telling some people this. My opinion is auto drive is best suited for flying cars, exactly like we see, for example, in the Star Wars prequels,
Oh, yeah.
because it's easy. You don't have to worry about roads. You don't have to worry about, I mean, you got the occasional bird maybe, but you don't have to worry about like people running in front of the car or anything.
Mhm.
But that's going to take forever to get the bureaucracy sorted to get it in. And yet England would be a perfect place to do it because we're nice and small, so you could trial it fairly easily.
Can you imagine the 10 or 12 million people or 20 million people live in the London area flying around?
You could control it if you had the computer systems, right? So they wouldn't
Yeah.
have to drive. They would just get
Right.
in, set their location, and it would go. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what more or less the government wants, but they just lack the vision, I think, personally.
Well,
But
you know, it's funny you mentioned before jetpacks can only fly 10 or 15 minutes. The Wright brothers, their first flight was only a minute and a half.
right. Yeah.
The fortunate thing was there was no bureaucracy in those days. There was no FAA, there was nothing. So they were able to advance fairly quickly at, you know, at serious risk to their lives and other people around them. But still, had it not been for that, we wouldn't be where we are today with airplanes.
Yeah, no, exactly, exactly. So I guess Orion Seed is your debut novel, and this is a science fiction thriller in the classic sense of, you know, goodies and baddies chasing a goal around the world. What encouraged you to go into that subgenre versus the various other science fiction subgenres that exist?
Well, the science fiction that I loved growing up and reading was more the action type science fiction, you know, where you had aliens trying to destroy us and humans trying to kill them and get them off the earth, or somebody had something and everybody's going for it. It's just a thriller type of thing. You know, I love action-packed things. The more cerebral science fiction that was out there where they got into philosophies and I would read through that, you know, and I did read through a lot of it, and it wasn't as interesting to me. It wasn't a page turner. And what I want to do is, you know, obviously I'm not Charles Dickens or anything like that, but I'd like to give people something that they can enjoy. And then, you know, if they put it away and don't think about it for another 10 years, that's fine. At least they had some enjoyment for that hour or two that they were reading the book and some excitement. And some of my other favorite authors are like Dan Brown, Clive Cussler, and it's all in the same action thriller genre. And I wanted to merge that with science fiction, a little bit of science fiction. My book is really science fiction light. I don't have that much SF in the first novel. The upcoming novels will have a little bit more, obviously, but I wanted to merge the two genres, and that's what I like, and I'm hoping that other people like it too.
Yeah, excellent. So this is your debut novel. How did you, I mean, not coming from an obvious writing background anyway, how did you find the writing process of this? Was this, you know, an inspirational story that you just dumped on the page, or did you have to work through it? And then what about editorial process and things like that?
So I've been inspired probably about a dozen times in my life to write a book and never really went through with it. You know, and all my traveling, I've spent a hell of a lot of time in airports. And one of the things you see in airports are just people walking around and various, you know, looks on their face, and it makes you wonder, okay, what are they thinking now? Where are they coming from? How did they live? And where are they going to? These things would be going through my mind, and I make scenes and scenarios. And some of them would be really good for the plot of a book. And like I said, I started about a dozen times, but never really had the motivation to complete it, or the time, or you know, the energy, because I was involved, you know, practically 100% with everything else I was doing. Now I find I have a little bit more time, and I was able to do this. And the book actually started with a slightly different premise, and it took on a life of its own and went this way. So people ask you about the writing process, and I'm not conventional. I basically, I have an idea. I know where I want to get to, and I let the story sort of take me there, however it gets there. And that's how I got there. The editing process, obviously, as a debut author, I don't have the funds available to have my own editor or anything like that. So I got to do that myself. And so that's where I leaned a little bit on technology that's available today. And I basically went through one of the ChatGPT formats. And I would write the book and I would say, okay, well, how does this look? Check it for typographical errors, check it for grammatical errors, check it for timeline continuity. And eventually, after many rewrites, by the time the book was done, and I, rather than edit the whole book at the end, I would do it 3 or 4 chapters at a time to make sure that I had continuity of story, of timeline, and so on. And actually, that's really great because from what I understand, there's millions of books coming out, and the creative process is still mostly from the people. It's not from the technology.
Yeah, I was going to ask you whether you fed the entire thing in or did it in pieces, because, yeah, my experience with AI suggests probably the piecemeal approach is the best one.
Yeah, unless you're willing to pay ridiculous amounts of money, the amount of bandwidth that you get to do this work is not that great.
Yeah, yeah. Also, I think just the AI itself sometimes loses the plot after a while.
I know you
Yeah.
got to check every single word because it does make mistakes.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of people, if they blindly go in there and say, okay, here, take care of this, and they put it out for publishing, they're going to see a million mistakes in there. Whether it's timeline, they change names. I don't know if AI does that on purpose, but
Keep you on your
it's-
toes.
yeah, you've got to check everything. Yeah. So it was like self-editing and using a little bit of technology to help with some of the rote stuff, like the grammar and the typographical errors and all that.
Yeah, yeah. I've been exploring AI for creativity for a while in sort of images and music and in writing as well. And I do find what I was just saying, like it seems to start out okay,
Right.
and then it kind of loses it or it just gets repetitive. It starts
Right.
getting really basic and
It-
repetitive.
It doesn't, it's like you could have an encyclopedia that has all the knowledge of the world. It doesn't do a thing.
Yeah.
You actually have to go in there and find it, right? So yeah, the questions you ask the AI and the way you ask the question will make a big difference in the answer that you get. My cover, I actually did that myself on Photoshop. I tried, I don't know, 50 different iterations with AI, and none of them worked. I said, no, this isn't going to work. So I was able to get a silhouette picture. I did a lot of photography too, so I have a lot of stock photographs of my own. I knew what I wanted to do, so I got the right pictures together. I blended them together in Photoshop, and I came up with a cover. And to me, it looks okay. I didn't have the kind of funds you need to get a cover art done, but yeah, you got to be careful with AI, and you got to ask the right questions.
Yeah. So I suppose that's why prompt engineering has become a job.
Mhm.
You are, by the sounds of it, then a pantser, writing by the seat of your pants.
Yeah, pretty well.
How are you finding that with the second book then? Not to get into that too deeply, but considering you've got the world building more or less done, is it sort of flowing? Are you coming into any
Well,
issue?
I've started it, and I've made a promise to myself to get it done before the end of the year. I've done about 6 chapters, and I haven't touched it for a few weeks, which is really bad. But it's flowing, it's going good, and the thing is that the story has a life of its own. So it starts to go in a different, you know where you want to go, but it sort of takes a different path and you have to follow it. And then you say, oh no, how do we get back on the main path from here?
Yeah.
And then you got to sort of nudge it back to the original plot line or the original storyline that you had in mind. And that's where I'm at now. I'm sort of stuck in one of the paths that was necessary, but now I have to get back to the original plot line without making too much of a jarring change.
Right.
I like to sort of segue things in every now and then so that they don't shock the reader that much.
Yeah. I found in a few of mine, I actually tried to catch them fairly early when they were going off the rails and
Mhm.
guide them back on. I usually found it was happening in conversations when the characters would just start conversing like you feel like they should, but then it's taking you in a different direction, and you're like, no, get back on the path.
And the other thing too, there's like really 3 or 4 plot lines in the story, so you got to sort of interweave them so that it makes sense in the end. You can't have four separate plot lines. You can have four stories all converging on the same point eventually, but and that's trying to figure out now where I can bring in those other elements of the story.
Right, right. So I was curious because it yours is a thriller. It's a global thriller, so your characters do move
Mm.
around the world a fair amount.
Right.
And so, how much research did you do on the locations versus like drawing on your own experience?
I'd say about 80% my own experience in terms of location and 20% research. I mean, today you can research any location in the world and get a feel for what it's like there and pictures and whatnot. But I did travel a lot. So a lot of the locations you see in there, I've been to. I've walked those streets. I'd say it's about 80% mine and 20, that'll probably change in the future because I'm not traveling anywhere near what I used to travel. But
Yeah, and there's a few locations that I'm pretty sure you haven't been to, but
yeah,
well, I
true.
won't mention those. I won't give the spoilers away, but yeah.
Well, physically, I haven't been there
Yeah,
physically.
exactly, exactly. So I always like to ask sort of the post publication phase. What has your experience been like with marketing and promoting your book?
Well, that's been the big hurdle. And the funny thing is that every week it's sort of dying off now, but every week I'd get at least 4 or 5 people wanting to market my book with a video trailer, or they've got thousands of readers that can give me reviews, and they only want a few dollars per review. And so I'm looking at this and I go, well, it doesn't really feel natural. And a few of them even wrote reviews before even approaching me and then saying, look what we did for you, like trying to guilt you into hiring them. I think it's difficult. And then had never having done this before, I tried to get a literary agent after I had self-published. And apparently that's
Yeah,
that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I didn't know that at all. So the next book, depending on the timing and all that, I will try to actually put out a few query letters to try to get a real agent to do the heavy lifting of the marketing and promotion. I've been taking out ads on Facebook, which have had effect. I think I've sold close to 1,000 books so far, which doesn't bring home the bacon, but it's a nice feeling. And most of my reviews are great. On all the platforms where I've been reviewed, it's 4.4 or more. Every now and then you get one guy who's just I don't know what his mission in life is, but he's not a happy person.
Yeah.
But that part of it is the fun part. I really enjoy reading the reviews. In fact, I told all my friends, I said, be brutally honest with me. Tell me what you think. That's the only way I can grow. You can't soften things up for me. And they've been very helpful. The marketing part is the hard part if you want to make a living out of it. If you just want to write books and put it out there, it's the easiest thing in the world. But if you want to generate some income, it's not that easy.
Yeah. I mean, there was one thing that would, of course, get agents to take your book, and that is if it takes off and you start selling crazy numbers. Then all of a sudden they'll be beating down your door.
Yeah, but how do you do that?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a
chicken
big
and egg,
question.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll get into your book now. So your debut novel, Orion Seed, and this is a sci-fi thriller, as we've mentioned. I guess I can go through briefly because it's on the blurb, so it's not spoilers. So it's an archaeologist discovers, let's say, something in Antarctica, and then it sort of triggers what I would say is a power struggle, chain of events with powerful forces trying to get a hold of this device. And it's right near the beginning. We know it's of alien origin right from the beginning, I think, because you have the very first chapter, which shares that part. And well, first, is there anything else you'd like to add to that description?
You're right. The prologue tells you what happens, how this artifact gets there or gets to the earth anyhow. And so it goes back, quite a long time, million years or so. And then after that, it just waits for humanity to evolve. One of the things, I don't know if this answers this question or if it's even a propos this time, but there's a little bit of historical fact in there. And some of it is fiction, but a lot of it is actual fact as to the occurrences that happened hundreds of years ago with a certain group of people. So I enjoy that. I really enjoyed that part, like weaving that in and sort of embellishing it a little bit to put it in with my story.
Yeah. So you said earlier on that you had a different premise when you originally started writing. How different was it?
It was different in the way that the concept of an artifact would be used in the world. And, originally it was something like, I don't know if you saw the Green Lantern movie or read the comics, where he finds the lantern and he becomes a superhero.
The
And
Ryan Reynolds one or the
well, yeah,
any of them? Yeah,
it
okay. Doesn't
doesn't really
matter.
matter.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Okay. Fair
The
enough.
Green Lantern
Yeah, yeah,
concept,
yeah.
the alien crashes on Earth and the guy gets this ring and he helps humanity. It was going to be not that, but it was going to be in that thought process, that way of using the artifact. And now it's evolved into something completely different because it's something that's very powerful and a lot of people want it for different reasons. And this will come out in the next issue, but there's something a little more ominous about it.
All right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing where it develops because from my perspective, you just got to the really interesting part to leave on the cliffhanger.
Well,
Um,
one of the things growing up as a kid, I used to watch those serial science fiction shows that were on for like 15 minutes. And the guy would be plummeting to his death, dying. And then, of course, then the next one, which would be a day later, somehow he'd survive.
yeah, yeah.
And
Get
it
over the
happened
hard part.
every single time.
So, yeah, first of all, I guess I wanted to touch on, you mentioned a true story in the background. Is that regarding one of the hidden groups in your story, or
Yeah,
is something okay, that's what I thought you were
yeah.
talking about. I don't know how much that's since
Not
that
not not
happens
the
later
not the
on, so
present day, not the present day
right.
group, but the group from
But the history
way
of it.
back. And
Right, yeah.
the facts that are talked about in there, the locations are real,
Right,
but the
yeah.
story itself is fiction.
Okay. I don't know how much we want to go into that as spoilers. I'm always conscious of spoilers, so I don't know. If you
Yeah.
feel like going into it further, that's fine. Skirt
No,
around
I'll
it
leave it
so
at
I
that
don't
because I tend to talk too much and then give everything away. And then people go, well, no, I don't have to read your book.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'll try to be cautious of that. So we do have two things that I'm really interested in that we've clarified are not spoilers because they're very early
Mhm.
on. The first one is Antarctica, of course. So I already knew some of the background of some of the stories, but I did our friend ChatGPT little search to give me the top 10 sort of conspiracy theories about Antarctica. And there's quite some good ones. Maybe there's a few that might be out there, but most of them aren't super crazy.
Yeah.
It's quite a fascinating place. And is there a reason you picked Antarctica to be the focus then?
There is. I've always wanted to. It's one of the few places on earth I haven't been to. So I've always wanted to go there. And, I knew that way in our past that Antarctica wasn't a nice covered island. It was actually probably like Venus, hot and spewing lava and whatnot. But no, I hadn't done what you did. I should have. It probably would have given me some ideas, but I didn't do any searches on conspiracy theories about Antarctica. I've seen a lot of movies about it, but it wasn't what triggered Antarctica. It was just I've never been there and I want to I want to visit.
Because I guess that's an interesting point to start because that is one of the lead-ins to conspiracy theories is the fact that it's so difficult to travel there. You can't just hop a liner and get on to Antarctica and set up a camp or something. You have to go through all these bureaucratic hurdles. You have to have
Right.
sort of research licenses and things.
That's right.
And that feeds into a lot of conspiracy theories. And you could argue, all right, they just don't want people to freeze to death all en masse or something. But it definitely feeds into the theories. You can travel to the North Pole, but you can't travel to the South Pole, which is kind of interesting.
And it's funny that maybe a month after I published my book, I was reading the story that they found some kind of structure hundreds of meters below the ice. So they're still sort of investigating it, and I haven't heard any more stories about it. And this was mainline stories. It wasn't conspiracy theorists or anything like that. So
Yeah,
pretty cool.
that one's interesting because, and there is also the claim of a pyramid that looks like from overhead views. I don't know if that was the
Mhm.
same object because I did hear about
Yeah.
let's say mainstream, and I'm not sure if it's the same object or not. But the
Mhm.
fact that there are things there, and then like you said, like you brought up in our past, so apparently sampling of the ice, they found
Mhm.
evidence that Antarctica was essentially a swampy rainforest 90 million
Right.
years ago. And
Right.
it looks like it sort of got separated and froze over about 34 million years ago. So I found that interesting. I did kind of already know something about that, but not, but it's, you never know where the conspiracies end and the reality starts. And I don't think anyone properly knows right now. I don't think
Yeah.
we've done enough. Have you, so you haven't really searched in too much into this type of stuff on Antarctica then, have you?
No, I haven't. My mind is full of conspiracy theories as it is, so I don't have to go far to find them. But no, I actually didn't do very much research on it for Antarctica per se. I did a lot more research and again, I don't think it's a spoiler because you can see it in my ad, is the Mariana Trench.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That one's I guess that's another place you haven't been, as we said. Yeah.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
The deepest I've been underwater is 120 feet.
Yeah, that's still pretty good, I guess. Did you 120
I, u-
feet? Did
I
you
used to
go in a
scuba dive.
scuba? Okay, I was scuba. So
Yeah,
you must be certified then to go that
I
deep.
was. I mean, I haven't scuba for probably 30 years now, but yeah, no, actually very enjoyable. I really enjoyed scuba diving.
Yeah, I did a very short course. I think we did something like 6 or 12 meters at maximum depth. That was amazing. I was in the Red Sea, and yeah, it's a beautiful experience. What was your favorite place you've scuba dived then?
Well, it was at the Cayman Islands, and that's where we went down to 140 feet. We were down at 140 feet. Everything, all the color was practically gone. Everything was dark blue or black, and the water is crystal clear.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, you're in a boat, you can see down 100 feet or 30 meters. It's just incredible.
yeah. Did you draw on any of your experience for certain parts of the story then? Like,
Well, the scuba diving, some of the sea creatures I saw helped. You sort of know what it's like down there. You know what the pressure's like a certain depth. And also the fact, the color starts to disappear after a while and you become buoyant in the first 10 meters of water. But then as you go deeper, you actually become more dense and you start to sink.
hmm.
And you got to be very conscious of that and very careful that your vest keeps you neutrally buoyant. Otherwise, you'll sink too fast and never come up.
So, in addition to the Antarctica stuff, then you do have, I mean, right in the prologue, as you said, you feature an alien race, and it is
Mhm.
called Orion Seed. So, presumably, there's some connection with the Orion
It's
relation.
actually the only constellation that I can readily pick out of the sky.
Okay.
I always loved astronomy, but I never studied it and I never really spent much time with it enough to know all the different constellations. But Orion's belt I look up and there it is. I know that one.
Because I'm curious that getting into the conspiracy stuff, there's obviously thoughts in some circles that the pyramids align with the stars on the belt.
Well, do
Um, so
they?
maybe I'm giving you a lot of food
You
for
give me
your
ideas.
series here.
I'll have to acknowledge you in my next book.
I'll forward you my notes. So I'm quite curious. I mean, because there's obviously a lot of ancient astronaut theories and the things like that as well. I guess I can't really. I'm tempted to ask you where you're going, but obviously I can't ask you that because that'd be a major spoiler. So, what inspired the alien angle of this? You wanted the artifact to have kind of, let's say, beyond human abilities, I imagine.
The alien angle comes from the fact that I firmly believe that there's intelligent life beyond our own world. I think you have a science background, if I read correctly. You do the math and you look at even the known universe, forget the actual universe and how endless it is. You do the math, and it's statistically impossible that we're the only intelligent life in it. And then you take a look at the time span. So our Earth is what, 4.5 billion years old. And that means that the universe was 10 billion years old already by the time the Earth was starting to, or our solar system was starting to form.
Right.
We've only been intelligent life, human life on Earth has only been around for a couple 100,000 years. That is not even a drop in the ocean of time. And so, what's to say that even 4 billion years preceding human life on Earth, it's just, to me, inevitable that there are other civilizations didn't, start and are much more advanced than we are.
Yeah, yeah. Have you heard of the Silurian hypothesis?
Maybe it sounds familiar, but
That's the one that suggests that because basically civilization, if it stopped functioning entirely, would be destroyed without a trace within like 10,000 years. It postulates that, let's say, a million or more years ago, there could have been another advanced civilization. And the proponents of it suggest that there might actually have been one based on certain chemical compositions in the soil.
Yeah, I've heard, yes, things about that. I didn't know it had an actual name, the Solarian theory or anything. I don't know how hospitable our environment would be to life 2 million years ago or 10 million years ago. Dinosaurs are fine, but they had thick skins. And maybe aliens, of course, would not necessarily be like we are. The possibility is there. I don't see why not. In 4.5 billion years, a lot of things can happen.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and some people say, oh, that's where the lizard people were. So there you go, the lizard people, yeah. So they wouldn't even need to be human, yeah. So the one other thing, I guess, oh, actually, I wanted to go back onto the aliens, let's say extraterrestrials for a moment. Do you think that there are any of them here on the Earth right now?
Again, I think it's highly possible. Whether it's probable or not, I don't know. The only way that we'll be able to get from, to explore the universe properly is if we do get faster than light speed.
Right.
And even traveling at the speed of light, it would take 405 years for somebody from, one of the Orion belt stars to get to us. And that's a long lifespan.
Yeah.
We wouldn't make it.
I mean, yeah, 4 years just to get to the nearest star.
Yeah. And if you go beyond the speed of light a little bit, then strange things happen. We don't really know if we'd ever get there, even at that. But I'm sure they're out there racing around the universe because they've been around longer than we have. There's nothing that tells me that the human race started 200,000 years ago and the rest of the civilizations in the universe started at the same time. They could have started billions of years ago,
Right.
which means they'd have a bit of a head start on us,
Yeah, if they're still around, yeah. Do you think that maybe they've been trying to communicate with us or possibly watch us? I mean, we've had three interstellar objects coming through the solar system that we know of. And then what I was thinking about, and bring this up, this is very sort of conspiracy theorist in some ways, although some people stand by it, is the crop circles, which is actually more, if you dig into the crop circles, it's actually seems to be more complicated than it's portrayed in the mainstream, which is interesting.
And the crop circles sort of are a mystery to me. I say, okay, well, as a prank, it's a great prank. But to be able to do that in so many areas of the world and not get noticed with all the surveillance that we have all the time, even from satellite photos, satellites can read your license plate. So they should be, as they're whirring around, they might find something, but they haven't. So how they occur, it's strange.
Yeah, it's interesting because I did see a video diving into this. There is some strange stuff behind it in terms of the suggestion that the British military tried to sort of do a discovery thing in the field. And there's suggestion they were the ones that created the idea that it was a hoax, basically. And then the other thing that's interesting is apparently, again, from the rabbit holes I dive into, that apparently there are two types of crop circles. There are the ones that look to be man-made, almost
Right.
100% guaranteed to be. And what they can do is they can tell the difference by, and well, this is your field, so maybe you can look into this as well, by the way the stalks break. So if you use the technique that they've shown, then you break the stalks in a pretty
certain way.
predictable way. But
Right.
there are crop circles where the stalks are not broken that way. What it looks like is they were hit by some kind of radiation and the center of the stalk just bursts. And so they don't have the same breaking pattern. And those are the ones that a lot of people will say are legitimate. So it's an interesting
Maybe they just go
story.
in with a monstrous weed whacker and
Yeah. Smack it
put
down.
it.
Yeah. That's
I make fun of it. To me, it's a mystery. Is like I said, I understand people pranking and doing it, but to do it on a continual basis over large areas of the world, that's beyond belief.
Yeah. We have one more part of your story that's interesting to me, which, well, I mean, it's all interesting. I don't want to say
Oh,
it bad
thank you.
like that.
Thank you.
But
Appreciate that.
but one more sort of let's say I've divided into three areas. One is the Antarctic, one is the aliens, and the third one is the power groups. So you've got the power groups chasing the artifacts. Is there a reason you picked that particular group without naming it? Is it just because there is that history to it? and then you just sort of built on that. There was other. So I was wondering, so for example, the Illuminati would come up as something that's, let's say, a bit more fanciful. And there's a variety of other groups. Again, I gave the AI a question for top 10, groups like this, and it came up with most of them which are real. So that's the interesting thing, right? So just curious why you picked this one without sort of, if we can skirt around any spoilers.
Primarily because of the history, and also because I'll be able to weave more historical figures into it as the storyline proceeds. So you mentioned the Illuminati, which is pretty interesting because they were a secretive group that were trying to control their various countries and governments where they were living at the time. And they were all intermingled with other groups, which, when you sort of take a look at it, a lot of these people were members of all these groups. And it weaves itself through history. So whether or not they were actually connected, I don't know. But it's interesting to hypothesize that they were doing it for whatever reason. So the history part of it is the reason that this particular group got picked. And it's the continuing history and the line that weaves through all of them that you'll see again in the next novel.
Yeah, well, it was quite interesting. Well, how do I phrase this? One thing that occurred to me with the good guys, let's say in their race away from the bad guys, let's say, we'll put it that way, is you've got your main character described as an archaeologist, and he, of course, brings in friends.
Geophysicist. Yeah.
Geophysicist. Okay.
Yeah.
But the good guys definitely seem to have deep pockets as they're running away from the bad guys. It made me wonder if there was like counterbalancing, if you had any thought to bringing in a counterbalancing power behind the scenes on the good side, for example.
Oh, but thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I'll send you the transcript afterwards. You can write down all the notes. It did occur to me, like, it was just a thought I come up with when I was reading that, because it seemed like there was a lot of favors being pulled in that would require a fair amount of power. You're going to bring in any more baddies, do you think? Or you're going to leave it at the one group and let it not get too complicated?
The Earthbound baddies have all been spoken for.
Okay. Did you have fun writing them? Because you did have some interesting archetypes of characters there.
I did, and a couple of the names are actual people that I know, even though it's not at all what they do for a living. I sent them the book to read and to get their comments, and they were very effusive and happy that they were in the book and being portrayed as this person or that person, and yeah, so that worked out good. When it comes to making up names and characters, it's a lot of times you read science fiction, you get all these weird names made up of symbols and characters and numbers and whatnot. And it's difficult to even remember them and to write them and to pronounce them. And so I tried to keep it where somebody can still pronounce the name, and it's no more than 3 or 4 syllables at the most.
Yeah. I guess you want to keep the names fairly realistic as well, don't you? I mean, so you draw from different cultures around the world then.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed doing that part of it and bringing in characters of people that I knew into the book. And sometimes the character of the person and the name are totally different. And other times the name is real and the character is different. So it's, that way nobody can sue me.
Well, it's good that the people you checked with didn't mind as well.
No, they loved it. They loved it.
That's excellent. Did you have a favorite character that you wrote? And if it's too far in the book, you don't have to tell me the name.
Actually, they're all my favorite. I think I have to develop the characters a little more in terms of their personality and their interaction with other people, rather than just having all this action going on forever. I don't know what you think about that, but that's what I think I should be doing. And that's from some of the feedback I've gotten. The character development is very important. And it's one of the things when I read that I like to see. It's not as easy when you try to do it yourself and you're writing a book and to bring all this information in and keep it interesting at the same time. You don't want it to be just a litany of, character traits.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, my favorite actor is the main character, Not that I'm a geophysicist, but I've been to a lot of ancient sites in the world, in Egypt mostly, and even in Ukraine, not quite as old, and in Greece and Italy, and I've been to Lebanon, Baalbek, Syria, and I've been to other parts of the Middle East. I haven't visited any real sites there, but it was always interesting to me. You take a look at some of the architecture in Egypt from thousands of years ago, and literally it's laser sighted. I mean, it's so straight, and the joints are perfect. And you look at what's going on today in Egypt, and you go, what happened? These engineers, they must have gone somewhere, But yeah, it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, that's one of the most interesting things that we tend to have this view that we're progressing all the time. But like you said, you look at a lot of the really ancient stuff is absolutely amazingly crafted, and we can't reproduce it anymore.
No,
And like, are we really progressing? Really? I mean, we have different types of technology now, but you know, I mean, most people don't know how any of our technology works nowadays. But I mean, well, we lost all of that ability to craft as well. And like you say, even within the culture there, right?
Mhm.
That's not even going to something else I just was following recently is the green Sahara. So the idea that okay, so the Sahara was green 5 to 10,000 years ago. Given that it was for such a long period, it's quite possible that the Egyptian empire didn't arise at that period when we think it did, but rather that was the end of a previous empire
Yeah.
that spanned the Sahara. So that would be quite a fascinating thing as well. I was wondering, are you planning, maybe if it's too much spoiler, you don't have to say anything, but are you thinking about it incorporating other sites and well, some of the fantastic sites into the story as it goes along?
I am actually, and in fact, I have a business trip coming up in Saudi Arabia, and I'm going to be there for about 10 days. And Saudi Arabia is mostly desert, as you know. And so I plan to do some sightseeing while I'm there to see what potential areas. I'll be mostly by the Red Sea, by the way, where you've been. Um, yeah, so I do, and there's, again, I've been to Turkey hundreds of times, the parts of Turkey that are really interesting, that could be incorporated into this. And yeah, I was definitely planning, if not present day, definitely in the historical context.
Right. I mean, yeah, you brought up Turkey and some of the stuff they've found in Turkey just sort of opens your mind like what must have been like, 5, ten
Mhm.
thousand years ago. Göbekli Tepe and some of the underground cities they've found huge
In
cave,
Cappadocia, yeah.
yeah, huge networks of caves and stuff like that. Yeah.
Hmm.
Completely amazing. All right. So we're nearing the end, but I wanted to know, so you mentioned that you were hoping to finish writing by the end of the year.
Hmm.
When are you hoping to have the sequel out?
Well, I'm going to go the traditional route and try to find an agent, and I'll give that, you know, a month or two. And if I get too many rejections, then I'll just put out. So definitely in the first quarter, it'll be out. If I self-publish. If I don't self-publish, if I get an agent, then I don't know what the process is after that. But I
Right.
understand it could take a while after that.
Yeah, potentially a couple of years.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
From what I've heard, yeah, depending. Yeah, so be prepared. It could be a little bit sooner, but I think a few years is usually the norm. An agent will have to find a publisher, and the publisher will have to fit it into their schedule and convince their market. I don't think they'd have too much trouble convincing their marketing team because thrillers are a pretty hot, well, fairly hot genre, so that wouldn't be necessarily a problem. But yeah, there's all the hurdles to go through. The joys that way. You can see I'm mostly on the self-publishing train. However, you could also look at some of the sort of small to middle-sized publishers. I've had a lot of people on my program from Athon Books. Might be somewhere to look as well.
I've submitted my book to them, and I don't know what their timeline is. It's been about, I guess, 2 months, and I haven't really heard back. So maybe I'll jog them in a little while, see there's any progress.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually knew that from listening to one of your other
Oh,
podcast
okay.
interviews
Great.
where you had an author on there who was doing quite well with Athon. And I said, oh, let me look into that.
They seem to be pretty good, but I do feel their primary focus is the lit RPG, game lit type
Right.
progressive
Right.
stories.
And they got a lot of fantasy and all that.
And
Yeah.
then some military sci-fi seems to be their
Mhm.
other direction. But yeah, I mean, I'm gonna when I get mine out and ready, I'm probably approach them as well. So I wanted to draw this to a close with the big question,
Mhm.
which is a multi-part thing, but sort of staying on the same idea of, well, a little bit of the way our society is going and a little bit of what's out there. So I think increasingly people are seeking sort of something more, and I think sort of a broader awareness maybe, or maybe a solution to the chaos that's happening, or the control that's being impressed on us from our governments. I mean, in the UK, we see this a lot. And some are looking to religion, and some are looking to the stars. And this has been going on for a while, but I think it's maybe getting more so. And what I was wondering is, do you think we're at a place now in our general development of humanity, or at least the Western societies, which we usually take as the epitome of human development, where we need guidance from other beings, such as maybe out there beings that have succeeded, whether it's religious beings or whether it's other alien beings who have gotten past the hurdles? Or do you think that we can do it ourselves? And another class of beings that are more in control of themselves than we are, since we seem to be rather chaotic.
I think if we were to encounter, or if an alien race were to show up at our doorstep, it would sort of slap humanity into a consciousness and say, hey, what's going on here? And maybe we'd learn how to work together a little better. I see a lot of the strife and conflict going on in the world as needless, absolutely needless. It's crazy. And how do we get beyond that? And yeah, we have emotions, and that's good. I mean, that's what makes us interesting and makes us unpredictable and makes things happen, right? But I think we need to wake up to the reality of life, and that is that we're on a very fine line of, either pulling the trigger and ending life as we know it, or going to the other side and actually making life enjoyable for humanity, not just for a select group. And believe me, I'm not in any way a socialist or communist or anything like that, but I do believe that there's more we can do to make this world we live in more user friendly to everybody. It's in the end, when you look at it, what are we doing all of this for? And that's really the ultimate question. What's the meaning of life? And I've always said, well, there is no meaning to life except life itself. Life is because it is. It happened, and we're here. So if we need somebody from the outside to come in and sort of put us in the right direction, that would help, and that would be great. But you look at the dark side of it. Well, maybe they could be worse than we are.
Yeah, it's a flip of the coin, isn't it?
Yeah, so it definitely needs attention. It needs people looking at it. And you're right, there's a lot of chaos in the world everywhere, not just the UK. I mean, a lot of these countries, and it's ridiculous. I mean, I go with the flow where I am because obviously I'm in a different country under different regulations, different rules. I don't want to end up in one of their 4x4 cells. But I think we need to take a hard look at how we're living our life today, we as the human race, and see what we need to do to improve it. And whether it comes from the outside or the inside, I don't know. But definitely a superpower showing up at our doorstep, on the far side of the moon or the near side of the moon, would definitely put it into perspective for everybody on Earth. Like, oh, we better get our act together.
I was wondering, do you think we might be creating a being that will supersede us and put us in place?
Yeah, you're basically talking about quantum technology and AI. That's possible. I don't have the apocalyptic vision of AI that a lot of people do. I can see it going there, but I don't think it will. And like we talked before, maybe they'll transcend it. But when you ask ChatGPT the question in the wrong way, you get the wrong answer.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the intuition to give you the right answer all the time. I mean, maybe 60% of the time it does, but the other 40% it's wrong. And that's something that we still have over machines. We can see patterns and have the intuition to sort of see the answer without knowing all the facts. AI can't do that. AI can't intuit an answer. It has to have all the facts, and then from those facts, it has to give you an answer. But we don't need that. A lot of times, I'm sure it's happened in your life, it's happened in mine. You'll do something without all the facts, and it'll be the right thing. How did you get there?
Intuition or even synchronicity in a way.
Right. So, and one day the machines might be able to do that. AI might be able to do that, but I think it's far in the future. And they'll come close, but they'll still, was it the Turing example of getting the machine to act like a human? That's very basic. Asking the right questions, you could still tell the difference between a human and a machine.
It is interesting that we used to use the Turing test as the sort of holy grail, and now we can quite frequently bypass the Turing test is sort of now already been passed to a large degree. Many people can't tell, like you say, unless you really delve down into the questioning and spin it around, you can then sometimes find out, it hits its wall in programming or something. But in many ways, if it's used in certain ways, people can't tell, which is really interesting. We've kind of passed that threshold already.
I was just going to say, with quantum computing, they've brought it to a point where they can actually do some calculations with it at light speed compared to regular computing. And eventually they'll get it to the point where the quantum computer will be interconnected with all the other computers somehow. And then you will have basically one mind controlling everything. So that's both good and bad to me, because if something goes wrong, the whole world comes to a stop. But on the other hand, you need something like that if you're going to have autonomous vehicles, if you're going to have robotic help at home. You can't have all individual intelligences walking around. They have to be interconnected so that they're aware of the world around them.
Yeah, that reaches a scary level, doesn't it? Because at that stage, you pretty much figure that entity is going to be self-aware. It'll have so much sensory input by that point. Yeah, curious. One last part of this is just including or not including the technology part of it. What shape would you hope our society takes as we move into the future? Let's say to secure the greatest degree of human satisfaction, utilize the greatest amount of human potential, which is something I'm quite interested in.
Well, actually, the prologue to the book sort of gives a hint to the way I think. It's not a spoiler, it's only the prologue. So basically the alien race, the Etherians, had developed, over millions of years, and they were on the cusp, like the human races, of practically ending their civilization. But with a lot of advanced thinkers, they went beyond that, and they were able to save civilization, and their technology advanced at an increasing rate, so that people didn't have to do the humdrum work. Hunger was eliminated, disease was eliminated. Then they found the secrets to longevity, and finally they got to the point where people could live as long as they wanted, not failing some disaster. And then when that happened, they basically had to have some kind of population control or start populating other planets. So the birth rate dropped to almost nothing, because people can now live as long as they wanted. And then they started dying off because they weren't motivated by anything. Death didn't motivate them anymore. Hunger didn't motivate them. They didn't have disease. They didn't have a time frame to which they had to do something, because they could live forever, disease-free, hunger-free. And then they evolved into this powerful group of beings. But again, even though you're the most powerful group of beings in the universe, what motivates you once you know everything, once you have everything? According to Maslow, hunger stops being a motivator when your table has a lot of food. So what motivates you after that? When that need is satisfied, what motivates you after that? And so when you've basically met all your needs, you start to die off, because there's no more innovation, there's no more evolution. Evolution is what keeps us going forward. And when you stop that, you stop your civilization, possibly. So when you extrapolate far into the future of what I think could happen, it probably won't, but it's one direction it could take. And if it takes another direction, I'd be asking, well, okay, well, how does that happen? And what do you do at that point? What do you
Yeah.
do to keep yourself going?
Yeah. No, that's mirrors my views on the topic as well. The immortality is something that sounds wonderful because we all want to see the future, but I feel the same way. And that one of the consequences will be, without question, I think, is the reduction in childbirth and the number of children. And I think just because also you don't need to pass on anything if you're going to live forever. So you'll
Right.
keep your resources for yourself. And therefore you interrupt, as you said, the whole evolutionary cycle. And your species only has one way to go, basically, at that point. So how do we avoid that then? I mean, do we have to go back to the Stone Age? Is there a way we can do it with technology to, can we use our technology? There are people talking about connecting people, not directly like VR or anything, but using what we have right now to create networks of people who then can work together to improve society, for example.
Of course, I think that's that's the way it should go. But the question remains, once you've improved society to the point where everybody's needs are met, what happens then?
Yeah.
How do you keep your life interesting? You can explore music, you can explore science, you can explore art, and that could keep you going for a couple thousand years if you're immortal, but will keep you going
Millions.
for an indefinite period of
Yeah.
time, or infinite period of time, I should say. So that's sort of a pessimistic view on my side, but when I extrapolate to the end, that's what I see. But getting there is going to be fun, and getting there is going to take a long time. It's not going to happen in the next 1,000 years. It's going to probably be 1,000,000 years. So that's going to be the fun part. Now, once we get there, who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just thinking as on a microcosm view of that, one of the issues we have now, I think. So when I grew up, it was always like, okay, turn the lights off because electricity costs money, etc. Because I mean, the light bulbs took a lot of electricity to heat up to produce the light. Now the LEDs require so little electricity that, you know, how do you convince your children to take care when they don't actually need to take care? How do you teach them certain guidelines and certain effective behaviors when there's no reason they can see that they should? It
Mhm.
becomes a whole more different, and that's sort of a microcosm of, like you say, extrapolating to this. When you get to a stage of when you don't need anything, how will you behave? What drives you forward? What motivates you? Yeah. I think maybe you might be a bit more depressing than me usually. I don't know. Let's see.
Really, I'm not. But when you take it to the end, to me, it's
No,
inevitable.
I agree. I mean, there's very few people I talk to that actually do have that. I ask people sometimes, what is your view of humanity in like 500, 1,000 years? And they don't really process the question. They just kind of assume it's going to be something like now, but with a bit more technology. And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, we have a path, and it doesn't seem like that's, there's a lot of stuff in there, and say a lot of factors that we're not considering with regards to our development. So anyway, on those notes, I think we're about out of time. It has been great chatting with you. Before you go, perhaps we can let us know when you hope to have your book finished or maybe out in the shortest term scenario, and where we can find you online, and if you'll be at any upcoming events or anything.
Okay, so the next book I'm hoping to have it completed by the end of the year. And the shortest timeline would be that it would be out in the first quarter. The longest timeline, if I get an agent, who knows how long it'll take, but that's a big if. So I think we can count on it being out in the next quarter, the first quarter. I do have an author website. There's some information on there. It's my last name, biancobooks.com. And I'll put updates on the book in there. And events, no, I don't have any events planned. Like I said, this is my first rodeo in book publishing. And so I might be attending some. I don't know. I'm talking to the local library, local bookstores here, and I might have a very local book signing and all that. But international or national events, I'm not part of that group yet.
That's great. Michael Bianco, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you, Edwin. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to seeing your books when they're done, by the way.
Thanks a lot.
And thank you for listening. Information and links related to this and all episodes are available at alternatefutures.co.uk. I'm also over at Substack under Alternate Futures, where I post articles on science fiction, socio-technological issues, and futurism. You can subscribe for free or sign up for a paid account if you'd like to support the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, why not share it with friends, writers, and other sci-fi fans you know? And if there are any indie sci-fi creators you'd like to see featured, send me a message at podcast@alternatefutures.co.uk. Once again, I'd like to thank you for listening, and I hope you'll join me on the next episode.
This is the future. Human error. Evolution. This is the future.